Welcome everyone to the awesome Asian American Book Talk and Drawing Demonstration. I'm Michael Trong, and I'm the Executive Director of the Chinese American Museum. I'd like to thank the FCAM board and staff, as well as the Friends of the Chinatown Library for joining us tonight. I would also like to recognize our community partners for this program, the Chinese American Citizens Alliance, Los Angeles Lodge, the Chinese Historical Society of Southern California. CAM has collaborated with the Friends of the Chinatown Library to bring you to tonight's unique program. Our two organization has been a long-time member of the Chinatown community. When CAM was offered the opportunity to present this book, it gave us a perfect reason to collaborate with the Chinatown Friends of the Chinatown Library. At CAM, we strive to tell the history and contributions of CAM, of the Chinese Americans, to both educate and to inspire. As an advocate for literature and education, the Friends of the Chinatown Library was a clear choice. Joining me tonight is the president of the Friends of the Chinatown Library, Cindy Fong.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight for this very special program. The Friends of the Chinatown Library has been an active organization in Los Angeles, Chinatown for over 40 years. We strive to support the programming, the collections, and other concerns of the Chinatown branch of the Los Angeles Public Library. We also have a scholarship program for graduating high school seniors and graduates of the Evans Community Adult Center. Tonight, we want to remind you before we begin that this program is being recorded and will be made available for viewing in the future. As a courtesy to our guest speakers, please keep your video off. At the end of the program, we will take a group photo, and at that point, the CAM staff will provide instructions for everyone to turn on their videos for those who wish to participate. For the best experience, we ask you to choose Speaker View, which is located at the top right of your screen if you're using a computer. If time permits, we will host a Q&A towards the end of the program. Please feel free to post your questions on the chat box throughout the duration of the program. If you're experiencing technical issues, please send a chat message to Chinese American Museum for assistance. Back to Michael.
Now, I'd like to introduce our special guests for the evening, co-authors Oliver Chin, Phil Amara, and illustrator Juan Caye. Oliver Chin is the founder of Medium, a San Francisco publisher of wonderful and inspiring children's picture books. Of the 50+ titles, 40% feature multicultural themes and characters, and 25% are bilingual. Medium published the original stories of the Argonauts, which inspired the hit animated TV show worldwide. Oliver has written more than 20 books, including the series Tales from the Chinese Zodiac, the Asian Hall of Fame, The Discovery of Ramen, Fireworks and Gunpowder, Anime and Manga, and Julie Black Belt. He created the graphic novel 9 of 1, A Window to the World, and wrote Tao of Yao, Insights from the Basketball's Brightest Big Man. Called an expert in Pacific Rim pop culture by the San Jose Mercury News. Oliver has been a friend of mine for many years and have worked with CAM on countless occasions, including an annual Lantern Festival, and most recently, our Virtual Kids Storytime series. Thank you for being here tonight, Oliver.
Thanks.
Next, I'd like to introduce Phil Amara. Phil is a teacher with the Boston Public Schools, where he created a Mighty Writers program to introduce his students to the power of animation, film, and comic books. He is the co-author of the Medium series, The Asian Hall of Fame, which explores how cool inventions came from Asia. Thank you so much for joining, Phil.
Thank you.
And finally, I'd like to introduce Juan Caye. Juan is a former biologist turned science illustrator, trained at the Science Illustration Program at UC Monterey Bay. He worked early on his illustrator career on the field guides of plants and animals of his country of origins, Colombia, and now owns and works his own art studio, Liberum Dona, creating concept art, storyboarding, and his passion, comic books. He has worked with Medium as an illustrator for the last 5 years for several titles, including The Year of the Rooster, the Asian Hall of Fame series, and the recent release of Awesome Asian Americans. Thank you for being here tonight, Juan.
Hello, everyone, and thanks.
And we'll go ahead and start the program by passing on to Oliver. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks very much, Michael and Cindy, and of course, Phil and Juan. So I'm going to do a screen share of a PowerPoint, which will lead us into reading some excerpts from the book. Okay, here we go. So in the next 10 minutes, I just wanted to tie our book with what's happening out there in the world. And we know, definitely a lot's going on. So we appreciate the opportunity to share it with you guys tonight and with other people in the coming months. So as Michael noted, a medium is focused on children's picture books, but over the past few years, we've gotten into some nonfiction with the Asian Hall of Fame series that Phil and Juan have worked with me on, going back into history to learn how fantastic inventions were made and changed the world. And that led us into this story, which was a little bit of a departure for us because our bread and butter has always been children's picture books. And to go from 40 pages to 130 pages was a little daunting, but I think the time was right for us because really the world needs more stories like these. And I think this fills a big gap in the bookshelf for citizens here as well as people from around the world. So tying it to current events, we've all gone through a lot the past year, one of which was Black Lives Matter. And I hadn't participated in the events myself, but we tried to weave these 20 biographies, these 20 chapters into the current day, even if some person was born, let's say 100 years ago, or in our case, maybe 50 years ago. So there's a lot to unpack here. We're not going to cover it all, but we did want to tie a lot of their biographies to this upsurge in awareness about race relations and racism. And naturally, one topic that overlaps all that is the pandemic and how we're going through a continual surge and how that has riven the nation, but also exposed a lot of fault lines. So as you know, during the past year, our last president scapegoated Asian Americans to a large degree, and in so doing, really caused an upsurge in anti-Asian violence, especially here in America. So even early on, a couple months into it, almost a year ago, a large percentage of people had experienced and witnessed such acts. Back in September, the Congress passed this resolution 908 to condemn anti-Asian racism and implore officials at all levels to work against it. And of the 164 people who voted against that resolution, all were Republicans. So the picture down here, you might have heard about the incidents in Oakland, Chinatown recently, where elderly citizens were pushed to the ground. We don't have particular personal explanations for that, but we do know that anti-Asian racism has really exploded during the past year, and it's something that we're all going to have to be dealing with, hopefully to diffuse in the near future. This is a different slide. It's about kind of movers and shakers in American society. So there are two groups that are in this picture of more than 900 people. Most fall into this shaded group, and only 20% fall into this highlighted group. So without knowing who they are, the titans of industry across the spectrum of our economy, one may ask yourself, what makes these people in the shaded group different from the people in the highlighted group? So a quick answer is the people in the highlighted group are people of color, and the people in the shaded group are Caucasian. So 80% of the most powerful people in our country are Caucasian, even though through the demographics of the census projected out into the future, by the year 2050, that's when people of color will become the majority of American citizens. So currently in the year 2020, Caucasians are only 60% of the population, but they're overrepresented in terms of being the most powerful and influential people in all sectors of life. So that's something for people of color to grapple with. how do they claim their fair share of not just the American dream, but representation in the halls of government and elsewhere. So a lot of these topics are being dealt with in a graphic novel or comic book format, which is fairly recent in terms of book publishing. Art Spiegelman back in the 90s was credited with the first graphic novel in America. And since then, a lot of other people from other multicultural backgrounds have been able to tell their own stories. So we wanted to be mindful of that, but not take the typical graphic novel route. We also had to be mindful of a legacy of stereotypes of Asians in America in all forms of popular culture and media. So having grown up reading The Five Chinese Brothers, it was something I definitely wanted not to do. And we wanted to provide positive role models in our stories, which would be counterbalancing weights to decades and decades of misrepresentation. And over the past few years, Asian Americans in media have become more prevalent, not just as actors and actresses, but also as producers and directors. So I haven't seen Minari yet, but I do plan to do that. That's Stephen Yoon from The Walking Dead. This was a recent documentary at Sundance about Asian students at Lowell High School here in San Francisco. And other people have been able to kind of break that glass ceiling and become represented, even though it took them a long time and maybe a lot of effort to self-finance their own stories. So last year was Asian Americans on PBS. This is Kim Ng, who was the first female general manager in Major League Baseball. And of course, we had some Asian Americans running for president. So this was the cover shot of last Sunday's New York Times arts section. That was the cover shot of the week before for the New York Times Magazine. So definitely the major media is becoming more aware of Asian Americans. This was a pull quote from the arts section this past Sunday. Mirat Nair is a pretty well-known Indian American director. And this was her experience, her feedback after trying to get her movie financed through Hollywood. She stood her ground and she was shown the door. Eventually she did make it. So in our story, we wanted to be balanced, not just in terms of gender, 10 women, 10 men, not just in terms of occupations from soldiers to lawyers to actors to athletes, but also in terms of cultural background. And the format was a portrait page, but each person gets 6 pages in the story and they're fully illustrated courtesy of Juan. And along the way, telling these stories, they intersect in kind of a network of history, which is often ignored or neglected, not taught in high school or college or even thereafter. So as we move forward and share some excerpts, we're going to see Juan's amazing art, which enliven the stories and have a variety of layouts courtesy of our graphic designer, Dorothy Mack. And along the way, at the end, Juan will do some fantastic live drawing. So that's the screen share for now, and I'll hand it back. So I think Juan's ready to read some excerpts. So I'm going to pull up a different program, my Acrobat file, and we're going to follow along in the book.
Can I start?
Oh, yeah, be my guest. Do whatever you want.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for, that was a really good, even for me, that was a really good introduction that Oliver did. I was into that myself. So hi, everyone. I'm Phil Amara, and I'm here on the East Coast. If you hear an East Coast accent, well, that's because I'm on the East Coast. So I hope you're all doing well in California. And I'm going to be reading a little bit from the Tyrus Wong chapter. So I had a career in comic books for a while, and even before I did this book, he was certainly a an important figure to me, so I hope you enjoy. Tyrus Wong, artist. On a Southern California beach, on the fourth Saturday of the month, a parade of animals would rise to the sky. Goldfish, dragonflies, owls, and pandas, butterflies with 8-foot wingspans, a dance of 9 snow cranes, a flock of 25 swallows, a 75-segment centipede, 145 feet long. The creator of more than 200 kites was a spry elderly man. Tyrus Wong shaved Japanese bamboo, constructed the designs, and painted the kite fabric by hand. He preferred this hobby to a past one because fishing, you're looking down, kite flying, you're looking up. Plus, it reminded him of when he was 7 years old and his father made him a kite. I love to paint, Tyrus told Pamela Tom in her 2015 documentary, Tyrus, which aired on PBS's American Masters. Anything else, I'm no good at all. Waiting decades for his due, Tyrus was lead artist on Disney's classic 1942 animated feature Bambi. Although not an animator, he took Bambi beyond conventional expectations and put his stamp on a whole generation's childhood. Big Hero 6 designer Paul Felix said, Bambi never goes away. We're constantly taking a look at it to the point where we all know almost every single one of those sketches that Tyrus did. He's the one who set the template for the film's visual vocabulary. Born in southern China, Wang Gangyo and his family were poor, unable to afford ink or rice paper. His father instructed him to practice calligraphy with water on old newspapers. Seeking a better life, 9-year-old Gangyo and his father boarded the steamship SS China in 1920 to try their luck in America. The boy never saw his mother again. No welcome waited on the other side of the Pacific Ocean. In 1882, the United States passed the Chinese Exclusion Act. The Wongs did what other Chinese immigrants did to survive. They pretended to be relatives of people already on the mainland. The father assumed the name Luk Get. The son became Luk Tayo, arriving at Angel Island Immigration Station off the coast of San Francisco, California. The child was separated from his parent. It was like a prison, the boy remembered, with only one chance to pass the oral entrance interrogation. He memorized pages of answers about his fake family and past. Now considered a paper son, he reunited with his father. They moved to Sacramento and then Los Angeles. Teachers called him Tyrus. So I hope you enjoyed a little bit of Tyrus Wong. And I hope you also get a chance to see the American Masters documentary. Well done, powerful work. I'm going to read a little bit from another of my favorites, someone who I barely knew about before I did the book. And it's funny how working on a project, the idea is not just to expand what the material that a reader might see, but it expands the consciousness of an author too. So this is Victoria Manalo Draves. In 1948, countries were rebuilding from World War II, and London hosted the Olympics. The first since 1936, these summer games did not invite Japan and Germany, but it was Victoria Manalo Drave's first international competition. Standing 5 feet 1 inch, this 23-year-old became the first American woman diver to win gold medals in 2 events simultaneously. She was the first Asian American to win a medal, the 3-meter springboard, just 2 days before her friend Sammy Lee would win gold in 10-meter platform, and the first Filipinx, depending on what you prefer, to win a gold medal. However, these breakthroughs were not easily gained. People often judged others by their appearance, not their character. Vicky grew up facing discrimination and limited opportunities. Her father, Teofilo Manalo, was from Orion, Bacan, on the Philippines' largest island. Her English mother, Gertruda Taylor, came to San Francisco, California, after her younger sister married a Filipino. When Teofilo and Gertrude wed, California already had prohibited whites from marrying blacks, or Mongols, Asians. Afterwards, in 1932, the state legislature added members of the Malay race, Filipinos, as off limits. Gertrude worked as a maid. A cook and musician, Teofilo served an Army colonel at the Presidio military base. The couple had a daughter, Frances, a son, Sonny, who died as an infant, and then fraternal twin girls, Consuelo and Victoria. As a child, Vicky wanted to learn ballet, but her family was poor. Overcoming her fear of the water, she started swimming when she was 9, paying a nickel to enter the Mission District's baths. Later, she would take the trolley to the beach, to the beach's saltwater Fleischacker pool, once America's largest pool, where a lifeguard told her about the posh Fairmont Hotel on Nob Hill. The hotel's swimming and diving hosted the water world greats of the time, like national diving champion Helen Krankovich, coached by Phil Patterson. I didn't start diving until I was 16, reflected Vicky. She wanted to improve and inquired at the Fairmont about practicing. However, Patterson told Gertrude her daughter could swim only if Vicky hid her Filipino roots and used her mother's maiden name, Taylor. In hindsight, Vicky concluded, instead of including me in the club, which everyone else belonged to, he formed a special club just for me, the Patterson School of Swimming and Diving. I think he was a prejudiced man. It wasn't special for me. It was his way of separating me from the others. Vicky then trained at North Beach's Crystal Bath Plunge under the guidance of Charlie Sava and Jimmy McHugh. She graduated from high school, but withdrew from San Francisco State Junior College when World War II began. Embarking on the amateur diving circuit in 1944, Vicky left her hometown for the first time in Shakamak State Park, Indiana. She won 3rd place in an AAU contest. I hope you enjoyed that little bit of the chapter for Vicky Draves and Tyrus Wong. And once again, thank you for being here. I'm going to pass it over to Oliver.
Okay, thanks a lot, Phil. So that was part of chapter 1 and chapter 6. We're going to go to chapter 12, where it's Dolly Gee. In 2009, she became the first Chinese American woman in U.S. history to become a federal judge under Article 3 of the Constitution. Her quote at the beginning was, "Oftentimes we limit ourselves, and it is important sometimes to get out of your comfort zone and to accept the possibility that you might be able to do something in another field that you might not have necessarily thought about for yourself." After her father died in a civil war, 15-year-old Jenny Flores fled El Salvador to join her aunt in America. The INS arrested her at the US-Mexico border. Jenny was strip searched, imprisoned with men and women near Los Angeles, and denied education, recreation, and visitations. In 1985, a class action lawsuit was filed against the US for mistreating migrant children like her. In 1997, the US consented to the Flores Settlement Agreement, FSA, to provide a standard quality of care for detained undocumented minors and to ensure their rapid release from detention to adult relatives or licensed shelters. When Jenny was detained, Dolly Gee had just become a lawyer a few miles away and knew nothing about Jenny's case. Soon, Dolly would devote her legal career to protecting workers, fighting against discrimination, bridging the divides between groups, and eventually upholding the rights of society's most powerless. The Gee clan in China's Guangdong province traces its roots to Zhu Zi, an influential Confucian scholar during the Song dynasty. Despite the family's scholarly roots, later generations turned to farming in southern China's rural hinterlands due to economic hardship, warfare, and migration. In 1848, gold was discovered in California and news spread worldwide via merchant ships. In China, America became known as Gold Mountain. The gold rush ended, but the Golden State still attracted migrants to toil on farms and in garment factories for lives better than those they left behind. Dolly's great-great-grandfather joined thousands who departed Toisan in southern China to come to America. He worked on the Transcontinental Railroad that was completed in 1869. Gradually, whites who feared Chinese competition for jobs stoked anti-Chinese sentiment. This resulted in discrimination, massacres, and the first US immigration law that banned an entire group of people based on ethnicity and nationality. The 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act prohibited the immigration of Chinese laborers and denied citizenship to people born in China. Unable to stay, Dolly's forefather returned to China. Her parents grew up in Toisan's small farming villages that had no running water or electricity. In the 1930s, Dolly's grandfather left China for Brooklyn, New York. In 1941, his 15-year-old son, Jim Wah, joined him. To learn English, Jim attended kindergarten. He also worked for his father, who had established a small shop making soy sauce and pickled cabbage. During World War II, Jim joined the US Navy and served as a gunner's mate on the USS Myrmidon LST in 1948, a repair ship that serviced the Pacific Fleet. After the war ended, he married his wife Helen, and they moved to southwestern Los Angeles, where they had a son, Kelvin, and Dolly Maisie Gee arrived 7 years later. Okay, so we just barely touched upon Dolly right there, but we're going to shift gears again. We're going to go to another chapter, chapter 16, and do a little bit of someone who I think you all know. His name is The Rock. I'm being bombarded by commercials to watch Young Rock, and when we revise the book, we'll add a little snippet about that. So pay attention, because The Rock's going to come in handy when Juan unleashes his massive drawing fury. Okay, here we go. This is The Rock's quote. There was a time in my life when opportunities were so few and far between, they were like little cracks in the wall. And if one opportunity came my way, I would scratch and claw and bite, and I would do anything I could to make sure that I grabbed that opportunity by the throat and I did not let it go. After his father died, Wade Bowles fought his mother's boyfriend and left home when he was 14. With a few dollars in his pocket, he hitchhiked 1,000 miles from Nova Scotia, Canada to Toronto. He hit the gym and later changed his name to Rocky Johnson to honor boxers Rocky Marciano and Jack Johnson. Becoming a wrestler with charisma, muscles, and fancy footwork, Rocky paired with Tony Ellis in 1983 to become the first African-American tag team champions of the World Wrestling Federation, now known as WWE. They dethroned the Wild Samoans, the brothers Afa and Sika Anoa'i, who held 21 team titles. Ironically, the Anoa'i's dad was blood brother with Rocky's father-in-law, Peter Maivia. Chief of his clan, Maivia was the first Samoan wrestling star and battled Sean Connery's James Bond in the 1976 film, You Only Live Twice. Grappling for more than 20 years, Rocky would mold his son Dwayne into an even more magnetic entertainer. After playing high school football in Pennsylvania, Dwayne attended the University of Miami. The 6'3" freshman was a defensive tackle on the Hurricanes, which won the NCAA 1991 championship. But Dewey lost his starting spot to future NFL Hall of Famer Warren Sapp and got injured his senior year. Graduating in 1995, undrafted by the NFL, Dwayne tried out for the Canadian Football League. Cut by the Calgary Stampeders, he asked his dad to drive him home to Tampa, Florida, and wondered what to do next. As a child, Dwayne watched his high-flying father. He practiced being interviewed by replaying wrestling tapes on a video cassette player. Now Dwayne asked his dad to train him. Rocky refused. Then he relented and literally gave Dwayne a crash course. Dwayne began in the minor leagues as Flex Cabana, earning $40 per match. Soon the WWF called him Rocky Maivia as the first third-generation pro wrestler and cast him in 1996 Survivor Series at New York's Madison Square Garden. In 1997, Dwayne won his first title, Intercontinental Champion, besting Hunter Hearst Helmsley, aka Triple H. Then he shared the ring with his father at WrestleMania 13. But Dwayne's smiling babyface, good guy persona did not go over, wrestling slang for convincing fans to care about you. In hindsight, Dwayne called this the turning point in his life. Struggling to find his identity, he had to be myself and be authentic. Later that year, Dwayne married Danny Garcia and turned into a brash, outspoken heel, bad guy, with a new moniker. In 2000, his autobiography, The Rock Says, was a #1 New York Times bestseller, and he spoke at the Republican National Convention. His daughter Simone was born the next year, and The Rock has been on a wild ride ever since. Okay, so I'm going to leave it at that big cliffhanger. I'll stop the screen share, and we can get ready for Juan to show you some behind the scenes on how all these amazing illustrations were made.
Okay, thank you, guys. That was very interesting. I mean, the whole book is interesting. So I'm going to share now the process of how we did the illustrations. Let's continue with The Rock. I'll try to be as professional as I can be while drawing my favorite wrestler of these latest years. I've been following his career since I was a young guy. So we tried to do a style for this book that was interesting for both, the adults and the younger generations. So what I tried to do is simplify forms. So what I usually do when I get a character is I get a lot of references. We have here Mr. Johnson, Mr. Dwayne Johnson. So the first thing I do is I have to do a whole silhouette of each character. And we did this for every character in the book. So I tried to get a sense of size, of shapes. I draw a bit of details at the end. Overall, I try to keep it in simple shapes and with broad strokes to give the general form of the character. It was very difficult for some of the characters in the book. The Rock was one of the, this was the first one I did for the book. It was the tryout. Like Oliver asked me, okay, we need to have a certain style for the book. What are we going to do? So I did a tryout. Say, okay, which characters do you have? Okay, we have The Rock. I have Bruce Lee. We have Tyrus Wong, which is an amazing artist, one of my favorite artists. And I started doing exactly what I'm doing now. She's sketching just general shapes, trying to give it like certain blocky style. We call it blocky because it's made out of blocks. First, we do the general pose. Say, okay, the arm is too long, the arm is too short. Then I erase, then I draw again. This is what I did every day for 3 months while Oliver was giving me feedback on, okay, this one doesn't look very similar to the character. This one looks good. So my favorite one, like the first one that I did was this one, and Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee is also very, very iconic in the, since we have seen so much of him in movies, in posters, in comic books, in TV series. So I knew I had to do something interesting. Okay, now here I'm having the whole body completed. Then I go and zoom in and start doing some of the details, like the face, for example. So I mark where the eyes will go, where the nose would go, right? Where the mouth would go. Some of the features are a little bit exaggerated, like his chin is kind of prominent, right? The neck, obviously, is he's very muscular, the guy. I mean, he can lift guys over his head. So you have to enhance that when you're drawing to make it look muscular, right? Okay, here the head is looking a little bit small. So what I usually do is I just redraw or resize the head. Bang. That's not cheating. That's using technology to my advantage. Thank you. And we go on and do small details like eyebrow, right? The people's eyebrow. The nose is very characteristic of the Rocky, because that's how he smells what the rock is cooking, right? He has this stiff upper lip, like he's always tensing his mouth. And one very important part of the Rock's character as of late, because he didn't used to have that the big tattoo, is the Samoan tattoo that he did recently. That's WWE. When I started following The Rock's career, he was on the WWF. That's when that was before when the WWE he was the WWF and was very young. And now we do the tattoo, which is it's very intricate. The Samoan designs are very, they have it's not a difficult pattern, but you have to be very mindful of the flow of the tattoo. So what I do is I just grab general shapes of the flow. For example, we have some elements going around the shoulder, right? Some elements here, going here. And then I start erasing because it's almost, as every pattern in every culture, it has a flow. It has a sense of where it goes, what it represents, and I did want to convey that feeling without making it too difficult to read, because it's very difficult to read when you reduce it, right? You have to simplify some shapes. Every time you do one of those things, one of these complicated patterns, you have to look it from afar. Like you have to see it from afar to have a general sense of the bigger shapes, and then you move in and do the details. That's a general rule, even if when drawing, like it's a general rule for drawing. Start big, then moving close. Let's change something here. I think that the jaw it's different, the jaw here. It's more square. There you go. I had to draw the rock at least 3 times. No, I did several drawings of the rock for the bio of Dwayne Johnson. And I tried to show his career when he had hair, like in his early WWF career, when that's the rock that I knew. And it's interesting to show, to see how the face kind of changes with age, of course, and with the muscles change. He wasn't as muscular as he's now. And every character in the book was designed to have something interesting in the presentation, in the illustrations that I did, in the introductory illustrations, the first illustrations that you see in each character, that will give a sense of his time period, of his origin, of his culture, of his current career path. So I hope it's when people see it, when people get the book and see illustrations, they see the art and I invite them to read more about what's going on in that illustration. It was we worked very close with Oliver to achieve that. And let's get a little more volume here. Coloring was also very interesting to do because we had to, I had to research about, okay, for example, Bruce Lee has this distinct palette on his posters, right? It was a very warm palette. The Rock, I wanted to give it a more Samoan palette, like it was, like it's a warm kind of inviting people to remember the sea and the islands of Samoa. So I hope it shows when you guys pick the book up. Okay, and I think that's The Rock. I hope it came. I hope it came. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this small demo, and thank you guys.
Thank you, Juan, for that demonstration. I just want to let the guests know here that Juan is actually joining us from Colombia right now. So thank you so much for being here with us. So next, I would like to now start our Q&A. So I will ask Oliver and Phil to please join us. So if you haven't already done so, please, if you have any questions for the audience, please, actually for our panelists, please add it to the chat box, and then we make sure we try to ask them. Cindy, would you like to ask the first question?
Okay. There are a lot of great questions here. So since Juan was the last to speak, Juan, can you tell the audience, what do you use? What art instruments do you use? Do you use an iPad or Photoshop?
I'm a digital artist. I have been a digital artist for a long time now because it's easier for me to, like, I parted ways with traditional ways of painting a long time ago. It's much more easy for me to do it digitally. I work in Photoshop on a computer, on a desktop, and on a tablet, and that's it.
Great, thank you. So how long did the research start, and how long did it take to do the research, and how do you narrow down the list to only 20 Asian Americans in this book, Oliver and Phil?
Well, Phil and I probably got together somewhere early 2019, just so that we knew that it was something we wanted to do together. And then we just constantly logged different names and put them on a big Excel file. And we wanted to make sure that it was 50-50 female male, that we could hit as many countries of origin as possible and not be overly weighted more toward one versus another, though just in the history of immigration, you know, the Chinese mostly came first, and then it was the Japanese. And then we wanted to do a spread of different people from different occupations, from the arts to sports to media and business, etc. So with all these different criteria, it became kind of like picking job candidates from a pool of applicants. And we didn't want to actually cover people who had been covered a lot elsewhere. So the Elaine Chows of the world had to give way and cede their spot. So for us, then it became more like a draft lottery. Phil, he won the role and he got to pick first.
Another question is that most people learn about some of the individuals in the book for the first time in a college classroom. Do you think these types of books can close the gap on the often undiscussed Asian American stories? And how else can we incorporate Asian American stories earlier on?
Phil should take a whack at that one.
Well, I'll do a short answer just from the point of view that I'm a teacher and I teach elementary school as well as a children's author. So I don't want to say anyone specific, but I mean, not to toot my own horn, this has nothing to do with any political climate, but I've been trying to introduce my students. So I've taught almost 20 years. So I've been trying to introduce my students to as many different amazing stories from any culture, almost to the point where I want to get a sense of what my students think the word culture is. So I try to frame it that way. I try not to feed them, okay, well, there's Asian culture and there's Caucasian culture and there's indigenous culture. I let them kind of shape it a little bit because they're just so interested in the world and so open-minded, and they don't discriminate. I mean, so I work in Chinatown in Boston. When I started there, it was maybe about 60% Chinese student body. It's gone down a little bit. Actually, it's probably gone down quite a bit. My class is so diverse in a kaleidoscopic way, not just because I have students that are what people would consider Black or white or Muslim or Chinese, or so getting a little bit off track. To get back to the question, at least the part about how do we maybe introduce some of these earlier, you just do. I mean, as an educator, I'm constantly striving to amplify the curriculum with figures of every size, shape, and whatever, and that certainly includes Asian culture, to the point where right now we're doing Black history. We want to keep adding to it. So when we get to May, a lot of the research that went into this book will actually help to inform an Asian event at our school. And I hope that means that students at 9 and 10 and 11 are saying, wow, I never knew, who that person was, or that innovator. I didn't realize how important Chinese culture was, or Japanese culture, or any culture. And what I really hope, because I mean, my background is well, I was born here, but my background is Sicilian. My wife is from Japan. I want my daughter to know both cultures and to use that as the launch pad to really learn about anything. So it may be a lot of these people are, something for a college course, or at least high school, the way we wrote it. But you just have to introduce Tyrus Wong, you find a way, and then you hope you can go beyond Tyrus Wong.
No, thank you for that. And I think that goes on to the next question. And I think this is for Medium, which is a publisher that focuses on Asian American stories. What do you see the shift recently in the types of stories the public is expecting to read from publishers, either from independent or even mainstream?
Well, I think there are a lot of different audiences out there, and you can't really cater to this monolithic audience, which has always consumed certain things like Big Bang Theory or Young Sheldon. I think that different groups or different artists, different creators are being able to rally their own fans, and if they have enough of them, they'll support them. So, you know, I'm in a fortunate position to work with talented creators like Juan and Phil, and I think together, if we try to be honest and forthright about what we're doing, you know, we're not necessarily here as teachers, but you know, it's one of the aspects of being kind of entertaining. You want to be able to put some meat on the bone that people will respond. And I think the things that we've done over the years have appealed to different audiences. I think the Octonauts has been kind of an outlier in terms of general universal acclaim and interest, but with this series, definitely it attracts a slightly different audience than our normal picture books, just because we're taking it very seriously and we're not cutting corners, and we want to show, you know, everything, warts and all. So I think if people kind of understand and appreciate that we over deliver, then maybe they'll have higher expectations for the next thing that we might try to do.
Another question for you, Oliver, is what inspired you to become an author? And the questioner loves your Year of the Ox book, by the way.
Thank you. I read that twice this morning. So definitely becoming a father and having two sons have always been the fuel to my fire. And even though they're older now and getting ready to leave the nest, I still keep that inspiration with me, and I keep that audience in mind in the types of things that we do.
And Juan, you know, I read your bio earlier. You've been working with Medium for over 5 years now. How has your style has changed, you know, from when you started with Oliver and the company into now?
Well, when I started with Oliver, I was trying to polish my first children's book, which was a very I tried to be multicultural, and I think that was very appealing to Oliver. It will deal with a lot of mythology from all over the world. And I started with a very young audience. It was aimed to a very young audience because I was having my kid, and my kid was going to be that audience. But after that, we started working with an older audience until we got to this point. And it has been very interesting. We have created characters, we have told stories that I didn't think I would. Like, my career was in science illustration, and then I said one day, okay, I'm going to try and do children's books because I love comics and I love my kid, and I want my kid to read my story. Like, at least he has to be proud of something. He has to be proud of his father, at least for that book, if anything. This book was challenging in the way that there were many characters that needed to tell a story in a single illustration that will give the audience kind of an overview and of their life or their careers, and we hadn't done that before. It was very sequential. But this one has to be one image, concentrate a lot of information, and that was challenging. But I think Oliver did a good job, and Phil did a good job on directing it, and I'm glad that it came out the way it did. The most exciting thing for me was receiving feedback from the people that I was drawing. From Jane Lu, I think she was giving me feedback on what kind of jacket she wanted on the illustration. I was like, yeah, sure, whatever you say, you got it. So it's been a very interesting road, and I think there are many. Like, Medium has a lot of stories to tell. Like I can see the the trends of the books they have published,
Mhm.
and I think there's still a lot more to offer.
Great. Thank you so much. And this is going to wrap up the Q&A. But before we wrap up the program, I would like to continue our tradition at the Chinese American Museum to ask everybody to participate in a group photo. We've been doing our virtual programs tradition for several programs now. So I'm going to pass over to Alyssa to guide us in on taking a group photo.
Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Those who would like to participate in our group photo, please turn on your video. If you're having any issues turning on your video, please use the raise hand button in the participants box and a staff member will help assist. Now we're going to take this time to give everyone a chance to turn on their videos, and I'll let you know when we are ready.
Okay, and as we're waiting for everyone to turn on their video, I'd like you all to know that you can learn more about Friends of the Chinatown Library on our website, and that's friendsocl.org. Now, I warn you, it's not in the chat because we're still working on the website. Be a little bit patient. We hope to have it up and running in a few weeks. Thank you.
Thank you all for participating and joining us in tonight's program. Oliver, Phil, and Juan, it was a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for sharing your books and highlighting some of the awesome Asian American stories featured in it. If you'd like to purchase the book, we have provided the link below. Make sure that you use the special promo code for 10% off. The copy will also be signed by Oliver. So thank you, Oliver, for working on that. If you're unable to follow the link at this time, the promo code will also be sent in the email that you registered via Eventbrite tomorrow morning.
Okay, so on behalf of Friends of the Chinatown Library and the Chinese American Museum, thank you all very much for joining us. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
And thank you.